Welcome to the channel. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Today I will be reviewing the new watch set to be released by Olto 8. It's currently on Kickstarter awaiting launch, so I'll include a link below so you can check it out if you do like it enough after this review. So you guys have seen Olto 8 on the channel plenty of times. Overall, they do great unorthodox watches and offer really well built peculiar designs with really good execution overall. Now this is the Tide X prototype. They've made a diver style watch with their signature design language, which means yes, it is skeletonized and it has a slightly modified time telling feature, which means it's more of a diver aesthetic than an actual functional diver. Now the most interesting thing about this model is that they state they used a self-developed movement. Is this their way of saying it's an in-house movement? If it is, absolutely fair play to them. So we're going to look at this movement a lot closer a little later on. So let's go over the specifications and the colors available. Now, colors first, you do have a blue, green and a red, which I have in hand. There is a difference in case finishing between the red. As you can see, the blue and the green have that steel-like finish, but the red has a PVD coated case, and the cases are also sandblasted. So you get a very soft and matte finish on this version. You also get a sapphire crystal on the top and a mineral crystal underneath, as it does feature a display case back. As it's a diver style watch, you also get a 120 click unidirectional bezel with an aluminium bezel inset and 200 meters of water resistance, including a screw down crown and a screw down case back. Now dimensionally, this is 42 millimeters across, 13 millimeters thick, with a log to log of 49 millimeters and a 22 millimeter log width. So it's a pretty standard dimensions, which means it does fit on a range of wrist sizes 6.5 inches and above. I actually find it to be very comfortable on wrist. For sure, that softer finishing on the case helps, and that super soft silicone strap is also very supple. It's got a great design with plenty of ventilation on that strap. Now the case is definitely proportionate. It's like a mid-sized diver with really good presence. Now as I said, this carries the aesthetics of a diver more than the actual function. Obviously with that skeleton dial configuration, you won't be able to use this as a dive watch. Now my thoughts on skeleton watches as a whole, I think they're either more of a novelty of being able to see the movement, and I think every watch collection should at least have one skeleton dial so you can see the inner workings, and which I think is actually quite cool. But it is just that it's a bit of a novelty thing. You might wear it now and then, and there's not many skeleton watches that you can wear on a daily basis unless that is particularly your thing. Now with this Tide X, I think they have tried to help that, which is why the time display is quite different. You'll see the linear application of the Arabics going from the 12 to 12, so the time display is just across the top half. Now the traditional hour hand is more of a three-handed disc, which does rotate across the hours. You still have a minute track for that minute hand, which is normal and it works like a normal three-hander. Now all of this detail is actually behind a solid black background, so it is still visible, and no doubt it's a novel way to display the time. But with that design of the hands, the minute hand does appear to be floating and it does kind of disappear. You can only really see the pip of the minute hand, and the rest is pretty much camouflaged at a distance. Now what's apparent here is obviously that level of detail and finishing. There's very precise work from Olto 8, and I've noticed this across so many of the watches. The hands are sandblasted, then electroplated, and the hour disc is actually covered with so many small details. You've got that red arch frame which is actually attached to the bottom of the hour disc. So you've got a two-piece design here. Now the minute hand features that ship's steering wheel in the center, and it is very intricate work, which I absolutely appreciate. And you take a look at the whole framework and the movement, and with this self-developed part, I do agree, you know, the skeleton movements have to be built around these skeleton watches. For the most part, the movements aren't like that unless you get a very specific one. But here with all the detailed work, you've got the finished screws as well. They have to be color matched to make sure they don't stand out. You can see all the gears and cogs. Actually a lot going on. You know, it could have been much simpler, but they've gone for this overly complicated construction of the hands, etc. Purely from a novelty point of view, it's really good to really appreciate this. You also got fairly decent lume. The hour disc is loomed at the 3 points. You have a lit up chapter ring and Arabics, and while my camera is doing a great job of picking up that lume, the hands actually have the brightest bit compared to the actual dive watches, whereas the rest is considerably dimmer, but it is still visible. Now when we move on to the bezel, here they went with the aluminium inset, and I'll give you my thoughts on that shortly. Let's first check that rotation. Now, for me, the bezel action is just about satisfactory. Personally, I do like them a little more refined, a little more, gliding. This does sound quite tinny. It's a little bit stiff in some places, very inconsistent. But I think that could potentially bed in, once you rotate it even further. But it isn't that nice sounding or feeling bezel that you want. And now let's move on to the case and talk about this finishing. This is going to differ from the other two colors. As I said, this is also coated along with being sandblasted. And the best way I can actually explain that texture is very close to like unfinished ceramic or unfinished porcelain, that that little edge you have on the bottom of dishes or around the rims of mugs. But it's just slightly softer. I don't actually really like how it feels. It is very smooth, but it does have this weird matte chalky texture. Case wise, it is quite a nice traditional case shape. It's very curved, definitely got defined lines around those lugs and also those crown guards. Also get a very flat and slim crown, which is large enough to use. There's no issues there, but it just looks a little slim. Perhaps they could have filled out those crown guards just a little bit more. And my point here is the Olto 8 know that this is not a hardcore tool watch diver. So then why give it this sandblasted utilitarian finish and why use an aluminium bezel insert? If they were going to make a sporty watch with a diver aesthetic, I would have gone all out on the case, given it really nice finishing, bare steel with some bevels, some satin brushing, used ceramic or steel bezel inserts, something like that, because it's going to be treated like a novelty item regardless, or it's going to be worn just very occasionally. Because if the case was top end and I'm talking really high quality in finishing, I'd be more inclined to then wear the watch. Now let's move on to this movement. This is the most interesting thing about this watch. They say it is self-developed. The movement number is SL2204B. It also has a rated accuracy of plus to minus 10 seconds, a beat rate of 28,800 vibrations per hour, so 4 Hz, and a claimed 42-hour power reserve with 24 joules. Now, when we look through the case back, we can see all the running gears. They have their own skeletonized rotor. You'll see a bunch of different cogs and gears, the mainspring, and of course that beating heart right towards the bottom. Now, I think this may potentially be a Chinese-based movement, potentially, because Olto are not big enough to create their own in-house entirely. But you have plenty of Seagull versions out there and Hangzhou, etc. So it may be something modified from their catalog. But still, fair play for going to that extent. And I would like to see this movement in a more normal looking watch from Olto 8, if they do such a thing. Regarding the actual performance of this movement, using the time grapher, and please bear in mind this is just a snapshot right now. It hasn't had a full day or a full week's worth of testing. But with regards to the time grapher reading I'm getting, it's around 6 or 7 seconds a day. Decent amplitude running well above 300 degrees, and you'll notice the beat error is absolutely flat. So from that snapshot, I can't say anything negative about the movement. It seems to be running very well within the degrees that they have stated, and yeah, it's also a high beat movement. So I think to summarize, I see what they are trying to do with this model. I would have preferred if they stuck with their usual designs of making really cool and edgy sports or dress watches. Even with this diver, they should have made the case much nicer to give it a high quality novelty watch feel. I love the fact that they have their own developed movement. The strap is quite nice and really well suited to the watch. And they've really tried to help that skeleton legibility issue with changing the hands and the time display. But as you can tell, I'm not entirely sold on this. But this is what the Tide X is for me. Now, the last bit, price-wise, I can't give you any information, unfortunately, as the Kickstarter has not launched yet. So please check out if you're interested. I'll link it in the bottom. Typically, they charge around £400 or so for the watches. So let's see what this comes in at. Now, let me know your thoughts below in the comments section. That's it from me today. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next video.